Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Jodi Wellman is in a master's program at the University of Pennsylvania. Her area of interest? Death, and how talking about this taboo topic can actually enhance our time here. This is a wonderful, wide-ranging conversation about exploring and implementing your deepest values to create an engaged and authentic life. Jodi, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Oh, I'm happy to, and thank you for having me on your show, Pat. So I am the one that you might brace yourself and feel like you need to keep distance because you might think things will get morbid in a hurry. Because I love to talk about death, but it's not because of death, it's because of life. And so allow me to share, if I kind of work backwards, I've always had just a general interest in the topic of our mortality, that it's sort of the absurdity of it all, that, wow, we try so hard and we're trying to do so much in these lives that are all of a sudden, poof, going to go away. That always struck me as odd. And I've also always been very interested in kind of the pursuit of the good life, the best life. You know, I still remember as a teenager stumbling across this book, 14,000 Things to Be Happy About. And I just thought it was fascinating. I said, wait, we can control our happiness. And so for me, this merging over time of a desire to help people live like they mean it. And so I did that early career as a personal trainer. That was 1.5 million years ago. And then, in the last 10 years of my professional life, working as an executive coach and as a speaker, and now as an assistant instructor at the University of Pennsylvania in the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program, that lets me do what I love to do, which is help people live on purpose, but I do it like doing it with a twist. So when I went to the master's program at the University of Pennsylvania, I thought I was a little worried they might think I was off my rocker because I wanted to study mortality. And again, it's not mortality for mortality's sake. It's because it can be a motivator to live like we have something to lose, right? And so in studying it, it really validated for me that, there is this plethora of fantastic research around it, which just made me feel good that other people have studied this too. And that I can really make something of this. And so it really has become a much bigger part of what I do in the whole wake up, time's ticking, like, let's get down to the business of living before it's too late. That kind of frantic flag waving. That's kind of me in a nutshell, if you will. Yeah.
But death is a taboo in our society, and I don't understand why. We need to go spend more time together because I also agree. What's the big deal? But do you go to talk about it with people ever and find them backing off? I find in the cancer community where I have a lot of ties, death isn't quite as taboo, but it depends on the person because that is such an existential kind of experience, if you let it be, that it can really shift the way you live your life. But that's not the majority of people. It's very few people.
Yeah, you're super right. One of the heroes in the death studies community, his name is Ernest Becker, and he wrote a book back in the 70s called The Denial of Death. And he actually won Pulitzer Prize for it after he died. So he never knew. But it really spoke to the fact that it's one of our deepest, darkest, gravest anxieties that exists. And yet our reluctance to go there, our fear of it, ironically compounds and makes our lives more full of anxiety. Whereas a lot of existential psychologists are very clear and see, and I get to see this in my day-to-day work, when we're willing to just go there and acknowledge it and not dwell on it, but again, use it to our advantage in this line of reasoning about acceptance and transition to, so now what?
it not only can be this animating condition, which is where I like to spend my time, but, for folks who do therapy around death acceptance and so on, that's the thing that can set a lot of people free from their anxieties is being willing to break the taboo, being willing to stop and talk and think about it and accept it. Because not talking about by denying it and pushing it aside or just, most of us don't have a will. We don't have a living will. We don't have a, we want, don't, la, 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 let's not talk about it. But that, unfortunately, it sneaks up on us and it does cause anxiety that we think is anxiety about other things. But a lot of researchers do believe that that's the undercurrent behind so much of why we're stressed.
I think part of the anxiety also goes to looking back at your life and saying, would have, could have, should have.
Oh, I so agree. Yeah. There are these neat studies about researchers working with people who are quite elderly. And they gave them an opportunity to say, hey, if you had a life, there's actually a life revision index that they created. It always has to be a boring sounding index in science. But, what would you do? Like, in my words, like if you could do a do-over, what would that look like? And they, of course, had lots of ideas on, mostly it was I wouldn't spend so much time at work or working. But the anxiety that grew in people who were elderly or nearing death, there was a direct correlation between whether or not they believed that they had a life that was fully lived or not.
Wow.
And so if some people sat back and said, you know what? I feel great. I've done it. I've done the things I want to do. Yeah, I didn't go to the pyramids and I didn't get some of that stuff done, but I feel like I lived. They tend to feel far more at peace and willing and able to die, rather than people who have that gripping and holding on to, wait, I didn't do those things that I dreamt of. I didn't take action. That's the stuff that really does haunt us. So you're so right.
Well, in your studies of death, do you ever touch upon near-death experiences?
Mm-hmm. I find those so fascinating.
I do too.
And I'm going to share with you that this may come across the wrong way, and I'll try to say it right. But, well, I guess I'll just say it. Like, I kind of envy people who have been on the precipice of death, because through research and through the people that I work with who have had the misfortune of getting close to death, they take life so much more serious than the rest of us. And so now it all works out lovely if someone is in permanent remission, say, from cancer, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's a pretty story. The bow is on top, and now they have this awakening to life. That's the pleasurable story I like to tell. I realize there are people who have been on the precipice of death and are still dealing with tough diagnoses or ailments in life. And I don't mean to be flip in saying I envy that, but a lot of the work I do is I want to try and create that dawning of awareness of, wow, this is precious, without having to go through the troublesome aspects of being close to death. But it is so undeniable, the research, that when people are faced with this incredible awareness, and I like how psychologists often call it the roar of awakening. I've always loved that phrase, that the clarity that occurs. I can still think of lines from a study where someone captured a quote from someone who'd had a tough illness and came back. They rebounded, and they just said, I have clarity of my priorities now in a way that all the pesky things that used to bother me have fallen away by the wayside. And I don't know about you, but this is like the whole thing of sweating the small stuff. Like, I sweat the small stuff, but wouldn't it be neat to have that perspective on a daily basis of, oh, honey, this doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter that the Amazon order didn't arrive on time like it was supposed to on Tuesday. Like, so what, right? At the end of the day, like, this is like, grateful to be alive and to get to breathe and to get to order things on Amazon, let alone have them arrive when you wanted it. Like, just having that shift of perspective, I think, is such a powerful, it's a powerful intervention that I'm always just trying to get people to even get a sliver of.
Well, and then the key is holding on to it over time. It's one thing to, have this encounter with death, realize all the great joy in life and everything, but then not slip back into the status quo.
Oh, yeah. You're reminding me right now of a client and now friend who I worked with when she
in her 30s, diagnosed with cancer, and luckily overcame it. 2 young kids, and she called her life like this is, it was her name, like Becky 2.0, and it was that this is now the life I'm leading in light of what I now know. And she became consumed with the idea of, I don't want to lose these lessons. Yeah. I want to make sure, like, because we all know we're going to adapt, and we do, right? We obviously, we do that for good reason, or we'd all go nuts if we didn't adapt to the good and bad of life. But she was very vigilant. And that's the stuff that I love and respect, is like, how do we create rituals? How do we create the routines? How do we create a way of living so that we don't just have yeah, that matters to me, and then all of a sudden let 6 months go by and then do oh gosh, I'm taking life for granted again, right? Like, so this is the work, I think, is how do we create consistent ways and reminders? And these are what memento moris are. So memento mori is this Latin phrase that translates to remember we must die. And it's an ancient ritual that often can be helpful when we have visual reminders. So I have a coin that I carry with me at all times that has, of course, it's a very stylish looking skull on it. I have all these little visual reminders. I've got skulls everywhere, but the little sayings and quotes. There's an app called We Croak that you can get for $1.99 a month that will pop up on your phone 5 times a day that will say, remember, you are going to die. And that is very convenient also to keep us honest.
Well, I think the way you stay in touch with that type of revolutionary experience is emotionally. You have to imprint that emotion of joy, of survival, of whatever it is in yourself, and live from there. Because it's not an intellectual understanding. It's a heartfelt understanding.
Oh, I'm really glad you said that, because I am aware that there are 2 different kinds of what they call mortality salience, which is just a boring way in research of saying, like, the awareness that we're going to croak. So there's one way to do it, which is what's called this sort of, it's just abstract. Like, we live our lives and we might watch a movie, and there's a scene where there's a car chase and, 12 people are shot and die, but, we don't really dwell on that, right? Or we go out and we drive by a funeral home and we can see there are a bunch of people there and we know, oh gosh, someone obviously died. Those are all very abstract, subtle reminders of our mortality. And they don't really do squat for us. In fact, they can actually be counterproductive because they trigger this thing in us, which it is actually called terror management theory, which helps explain what I said earlier about that Ernest Becker dude who wrote The Denial of Death. Like, there is a terror deep down with the notion that, like, we're totally impermanent. And so that doesn't usually sit well with us because we're capable enough as humans to know this. And so when we do try and push it aside, when we get these really subtle reminders, we, according to terror management theory, do one or 2 things. Number one is we double down on our worldviews. So, for example, if you align with a certain political party or religion or team or alumni association or anybody who believes what you believe, you have this desire to really align yourself tighter and closer to that, because it creates this sort of warm, fuzzy cocoon of almost immortality. Like, hey, I really believe in this religion and I'm going to dig deeper into it because it makes me feel somehow secure. Like, even when I go, the religion will live on, or whatever this political party will live on.
It's social validation to a point.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. And then the other thing we do is that we want to double down. We want to feel better about ourselves. So we want to maximize our self-esteem. And that often is related to how well we think we actually align with that worldview. And so, what that can do is create exclusionary behavior, right? Like, I really identify with my political party, and then therefore you over there, you don't align with me. There's more of a divide, right? And so it actually can elicit some kind of antisocial behavior, which is not good. And so I'm very careful to go, whoa, wait, I like to talk about, creating awareness about mortality, but I don't want to trigger that stuff. What I want to do is do the deeper route, which is the more concrete type of mortality salience, which
is getting more granular with it. And it's stopping and thinking, okay, imagine with almost vivid clarity what it would be like for me if I did have a diagnosis that was dire, or if I was on my deathbed, and imagining all the nuances. And like, if you really stop and play it out in a non-abstract way, that's the stuff that most of us feel afraid to do. But again, ironically, that's the very thing that can open us up to this, A, greater sense of acceptance, which alleviates anxiety, but B, more of a motivation to live with urgency. So that's where I want to say, let's jump into the deep end of the pool. Let's not dip our toe into the shallow end. We got to do, let's do this.
No, I agree with you. It's interesting. There are two books, both written by doctors who ultimately died. Paul Calenthi's, what was the name of his book? New York Times bestseller. Anyway, he was a doctor, I believe, in New York, maybe a neurosurgeon, I don't recall. A very high performing individual, obviously. And one of the things that I found so interesting, he and David Servin-Shriver, another high performing neuroscientist, when faced with their own mortality, both were a little bit relieved that they didn't have to live up to society's incredible expectations of their success anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that they turned their back on their professions. They didn't. They stay engaged and they move forward. But it was a realization that maybe this quest we have for quote unquote success and titles and everything else, how important is it in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, that is, I think that's the question, right? Is acknowledging at different stages of life, like, what are we striving for? And
why?
I watched this from time to time. I don't know if you've seen Steve Jobs' commencement speech that he did at Stanford.
Yes.
And there, of course, I just salivate at the parts where he does talk about his diagnosis. It was a year prior. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and his views on being aware that, hey, this is temporary. And at the time, unfortunately, he thought he'd beat it. But this dawning awareness of, there is no we put up this act, this sort of charade. We try and portray, we're trying to strive, we're trying to do things that are often for sort of this external motivation, extrinsic, I should say, how are people going to see me? Do I look successful? Are people looking at me and thinking that they like my shoes or my car? And, I'm not judging, that's me half the time. But what about the intrinsic stuff is stuff that can get triggered when we, again, are faced with, unfortunately, a bit of a rocking mortality moment, or when we do this work and we stop and go, but what really does matter? And so that's where, Steve Jobs eloquently puts it in his speech. I recommend anybody listen to it if you haven't yet. And the idea that the recalibration of priorities, in a way, many of us did that through COVID. And right, we all had this. Now, mind you, the world kind of came to a screeching halt, and that gave us the chance to pause and wait a minute, do I really want to be working for this company again? But part of it was the awareness of our mortality, because people that we did know of, or even people that we did know directly, were unfortunately dying from this pandemic that we couldn't figure out. And that did wake a lot of people up in a way to say, how do I want to be spending my time? And that's why there's no coincidence that we're in the midst of the Great Resignation right now, of course, reconsidering what does matter. And so that was just fascinating to see in society on a larger scale, right? But I do think that if most of us are honest with ourselves and we really do the work and we really do stop and imagine being on our deathbeds and what might we regret and what might we, if you knew you had a year to live, that's kind of the perfect amount of time, other than totally draining your bank account and stuff that, we're not going to actually do in real life. Maybe we will. That's kind of fun. But that helps sharpen for us. How do I want, what would matter? And I think it's a combination of things that I look at in terms of two spectrums. So I look at widening our lives with vitality, and those are the fun things we do. That's the
let's go and do a really fun road trip, or let's go to that amazing
Restaurant.
tasting menu,
Yeah.
like where you can go and have like all the fun things, like a bacon flight and all the fun things. And then there's the deepening our lives with meaning. And that's the stuff that has a, more substance. It's the spending time with other people and feeling like you're connected to something maybe bigger than you are. And for most of us, we're kind of working our way at both dynamics at any given time. And I think that if you knew you had a year to live, that's actually kind of a fun reflection question, is like, would you be wanting to widen your life more, stuff as much in as you could, go eat all of the chocolate you can and all the stuff? And or would it be about, I'd want to go and spend all that time with my family and my friends? Probably a bit of both, right? But it does make you, I think, if you imagine your life with 52 Mondays left, 52 weeks, a whole year left, does that give you a clue? The answer, of course, is yes, to how maybe you want to be spending more of your time now. Maybe not eating chocolate full time, but
part-time.
I'm with you.
Does it take guts to follow your soul, though, in this world?
Oh, I think it does. I really do. I think so for two reasons. The first, let's just say, speed bump, is that most of us aren't really even aware of what that means. So I work with a lot of people who are trying to figure out, and I call like soul searching, like, what do I really want to be doing with my time or my profession? Or people are often stressed about not knowing what their passion is. And I mean, we put a lot of pressure on people out there in society, right? There's a lot of pressure that you need to be not only living your best life, but, the whole adage of like, your work needs to be something that is so soul fulfilling that, do what you love and you'll never work a day again in your life. I think it's a bunch of baloney. Like, I think we can absolutely do work that is good and sometimes great, and that's amazing. And at the very least, though, like, let's just not like our jobs, right? We have to be in a position where we're aware of our passions and maybe augment our life where we have passion outside work that makes us feel full and amazing and alive, that takes the pressure off a job that ain't always going to deliver on that. So number one, I think that many of us are just sort of feeling like, I'm failing at living my soul's purpose or having passion because my job sort of sucks 35% of the time. And to that, I'd be like, well, actually, maybe that's okay. What are you doing outside work? Like, tell me what lights you up. Like, is there a hobby or an activity that when you do it, you get into that state of flow, like that psychological state of just being swept up and you lose track of time and you're in the zone and it's amazing. And do more of that in your off hours, even if your off hours are very wee. And then it means that, okay, fine, I can go in and do my work. And maybe 65% of the time it's pretty great. And okay, 35% it's not so great. So
how do you start to explore those inner passions, though? I mean, that's not easy.
No, it isn't. And I feel like that's actually one of the main areas of frustration for people, that at least the people I work with, is that there's this idea like it's supposed to be in front of me. I'm supposed to be able to tell, because if it was real, almost like love, like if this was true love, then the flame would be burning from the beginning. And it's supposed to be this romantic notion. And well, I think we watch a lot of movies that tell us that. And I think how to find a passion is that there's this notion, and there's an author, Greg Lavoie, who wrote a book on passion, and that I've just loved. And he has the way of putting it where he says, passion is the kind of thing you have to take risks on its behalf, which means that you have to be willing to get out there, like step away from the sidelines and get out there and try stuff on and see if it sparks. And so, I work with people where I say, okay, write a list of 15 things that conceivably could be interesting. Like, none of these things can repulse you. You have to be gentle. Like, well, I've kind of wondered about sketching. Okay, it's on the list. Or I've kind of been curious about taking French lessons. It's on the list. You get a whole bunch of things that are on there. And then you just simply take risks and start and try. And what we're doing is we're taking things that are like tiny embers that might be slightly smoldering. And when you go out there and you give it a go, one of a couple of things happens, right?
You might
Either
fail.
you go and you're like, yeah, you know what?
I don't want to learn French anymore. Thanks. But at least maybe you feel proud of yourself for trying. And there's actually momentum in that tells you, I'm the type of person that signs up for things. I'm the type of person that tries. You don't dwell on, I'm the type of person that leaves it, because I encourage people, abandon swiftly something that doesn't resonate, because you're just in pursuit of the things that do. And so it doesn't make you flighty. It doesn't make you kind of just, unable to focus. It's that I'm finding the things that light me up, but you got to go and try it. Same thing about professions. I mean, I'm talking about hobbies, which are maybe seemingly lower risk, but we get super rigid about our careers. Like, I can't change my path. Like, I've only ever been an accountant, or I've only ever done this kind of, I don't know, marketing, and I can't change it. Well, how come? Like, what if you did? And what if it, I don't want to be at the bottom of the totem pole again. Well, what if you were? And what if it made you really happy? Would you not ascend? If you're interested in ascending, would you not ascend faster because you love it? What if it meant just going? And so the success stories I have of people that are willing to just take that risk and make that change in pursuit of fulfillment, joy, being alive. I mean, there's nothing that beats the feeling of leaving something that felt heavy and like, it's not going to work, and making a choice to try something that could or would. And even if it doesn't, even if it comes close, but no cigar, that's okay, because it leads you to the next thing that might just be the bullseye for you. But those are the people that they're not full of courage, by the way. Like, this isn't about, there's only a certain type of person who's willing to shake up their career or go out there and sign up for a pottery class or whatever. That's not me. No, you know what? Everybody feels fear. You just got to go out there and try it anyway and see what lights on fire in a good way.
Yeah, Martha McSally says courage is a muscle, and the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And I like that analogy. It's interesting, though, when you look at finding some sort of deeper purpose that really resonates with your soul. One of the things that I see across all the stories of people I talk to is I sometimes think that there are commonalities. Like, are you seeking adventure, curiosity, creativity? And maybe within those categories, you're going to find something that resonates with you, as opposed to a pottery class, a language, something tangible. It does drill down to something tangible, but I think it starts maybe with something more amorphous.
I think you're right. I do. I think that, like, in the work that I do, in any coach really, like, worth their weight of their certification does, one of the first sessions is about, like, let's identify your values. What really matters to you? And I probably annoy people endlessly because I have the world's longest list of values. There may be 300 lists, 300
Oh,
on the
really?
list. It's overwhelming. It's ridiculous. But it's just kind of a, hey, because sometimes people are word people, right? And it's that for them, it might not be necessarily about creativity. Maybe for them, it's more about innovation, and there are subtle differences to some people. So, but identifying, okay, these are the top 10 values I have that make me feel like when I'm honoring them, I am living, I'm alive, I'm the most of me. And when I don't get to honor these values, well, then the opposite's usually true, right? I feel like I'm compromising on my core. I feel dead, all the things we don't want to feel. And so when we zero, and by the way, our values can change over time, right? Like, I work with a lot of people who maybe are in or were in traditionally intellectual professions. Lots of lawyers are looking for change, and then they kind of like, it's like a whisper, like, I really think I want to do something creative. It's like they're ashamed to say it. And when they make a list of your top 10 values in life, and you look at that and you go, wait a sec, am I letting that one flourish, or am I putting that one in the dark? That's usually the insight about, well, wait, if creative expression is something that feels really important to me, oh, wow. Well, when was the last time I actually did something that expressed that? And again, it doesn't need to be your profession. It can be about what you do outside work, or how you spend time with friends in creative way, however you want to organize that. But I think that's the work we have to do, is getting clear on what makes me tick, and then go live that life.
Now, the comment of spending time with friends is interesting because if you look at your core values, they need to sync up in every part of your life. And if your friendship circles don't sync up, that's a real red flag right there.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're really right. And depending on our tolerance levels, right? So some people are very much open to, hey, you know what? I know that floats your boat, doesn't float mine. And some of our values are, let's just say, non-negotiable, and some of them are a little bit squishy. But if you value, let's say, there's one that I'm just thinking of, someone recently that had a real rub in their relationship with a friend, because this person really valued consideration, like being courteous and considerate and thoughtful, like just that felt like they were raised that way to have good manners. And this one friend was consistently late, and not by 4 minutes, but by 20. And it actually caused a rift, which this woman was like, I can't believe why am I making such a big deal about this? And it was like, hey, let's not judge why you are. Let's just explore it and figure out why it matters so much, because there's a reason. And it was that she felt that her friend didn't respect her time. And it came down to, you're not really being considerate, and it makes me feel undervalued that you think you can just show up 20 minutes to the restaurant late because you know that, oh, it's just Marcy sitting here waiting. And this woman, the friend, just even after being given some feedback, just wouldn't change. And it ended up being a friendship deal breaker.
Wow.
You're right, misaligned values.
No, but I think that's really important because I think once you start drilling down on what your values are, it becomes harder and harder to compromise them, particularly if you value the gift of your daily life. All of a sudden, you realize, or you may realize, that you have to start stripping away the things that just don't work because they're never going to work.
I like that. And it does take courage to strip away sometimes.
Oh, sure, because you may be kicking yourself out of your own tribe.
Oh, right. Oh, I work with so many people that want to live life wider, let's say. So that's back to the vitality. Like, I want to try new things. And there's this one woman that I can recall. She's like, I want novelty. And by the way, novelty is like big in my world, because that's one of the secrets, I believe, to a life well lived, is we've got to shake things up to just kind of experience more of what life has to offer. And so she's like, I want to go out and I want to go to this Ethiopian restaurant in town. And my husband has no interest in it. And then of course that triggers, and then he doesn't want to do this, and then he doesn't want to do that. And this is, not necessarily like grounds for divorce that you won't join me for the Ethiopian meal I want to go to on Friday. But she had to come to her own realization initially that she, as I like to phrase it, like, you're your own like entertainment and well-being director. Like, you have to organize. If you really want to do it, either find a friend to go, or she ended up going alone. Mm-hmm. And she loved it because she sat at the bar and she brought her iPad and read and had this amazing meal. And for her, it was like, I went on a date with myself and I love it. I'm doing that every week now. Fortunately, she had lots and lots of salvageable things about her relationship that didn't mean she needed to eliminate him from her life. But I think it's a good example that we often might feel stirrings and interests to live in ways that feel more full for us, that others around us are just simply not interested in right now. And I feel passionately that, like, let's just find a way to live anyway, in and around it. And sometimes the person around you might kind of come along because they start to see you really enjoying that you're going to this neat yoga class and you come back feeling so fantastic that they might actually then say, well, maybe I will come next Thursday. That's cool. Maybe they won't. And then you're right. You need to decide over time, is this actually like a deal breaker for our relationship? Or is this something that is, you do your thing, I do mine, and we also have things we do in common?
And chances are it's a compromise. It's the latter, that you do, that people need to individually realize what they need to realize in their own lives, but that doesn't preclude you from coming together where things do overlap.
Yeah. I think that's great. And thinking now of a woman who really wanted to travel and her husband was just not interested. So she organized a trip with her friends to go to India, and they had a ball.
and, came back, and it wasn't a permanent rift in the relationship with her partner. It was just I'm just finding a way. Like I'm going to take a stand, and I'm going to, not a stand, because that sounds like a stance in war, but I'm going to make sure I prioritize the life that might feel lively to me or deep, with meaning. There are a lot of folks I work with, they want to go and do something meaningful in the community, like a volunteer opportunity, and they can't find people to go with them because others maybe just aren't interested, not forever, but maybe for now. And again, it's being willing maybe to do it alone.
Why is that so hard for some people?
Yeah. I think when we're out of our comfort zone, like you said earlier, like we have to, we're talking about taking risks to find passion. There's comfort for people if you get to come with me. And if I don't like it, then at least I've got a buddy. So I think it's just it's like an extra layer of comfort when we want to already be in our comfort zone. But part of me thinks, well, if you're already going to get out of the fully warm zone of fleece that you have wrapped around you, if you're already out there, then you know what? It's not that much incrementally more difficult if you go alone versus with a friend. And so, I guess I encourage people, don't let that be the thing that stops you, because you can't find someone to go to the Ethiopian dinner or to India or to the meditation class you want to try.
Well, and I think one of the advantages of going solo is that you strictly have your own perceptions. They're not skewed by the company of somebody else. And I think that's really valuable.
Yes. Oh, that is. I did a team workshop with a group where we talked all about them figuring out like a life that would make them feel fantastic between now and the end of the year. And they had part of the workshop, someone came in and did it was a meditation exercise. And meditation can be difficult for some people for lots of reasons. It's sort of, we judge ourselves that I'm not good at it. And afterwards we did a debrief after the meditation guru left. And that did come up a lot. The people were like, I kind of feel like I was thinking about like Josie. I know she meditates all the time. And I knew I wasn't going to compare to her because, we get so swept up in comparison, don't we? Or I was thinking about this and then I was wondering, am I doing it right? I didn't want my boss to see me like peaking and you're right. So I think sometimes the solo mission might be the one with the least amount of judgment.
Yeah. The meditation example is interesting though, because meditation's a practice. You have to do it repetitively in order to become better at it, to see the different layers and see how it impacts your life. You can't meditate for 3 days out of 7 and think that is going to have a profound impact. And that goes to perseverance, which also goes to the classic book Flow. Part of getting into the flow is perseverance. It's working at your craft, because it's only once that you've reached a certain degree of mastery that you're really able to enter the flow. And one of my favorite examples of that is Eric Weinmeier, just a remarkable individual. He's blind. He's climbed Everest, the 7 summits. I mean, he's just incredible. But he wanted to kayak the Colorado River Rapids, these are really dangerous rapids, solo in his own kayak. Now, he had a headset so somebody could talk to him and say, go left, go right, that kind of thing. But he spent 8 years training for that. He could not get the hang, after mountain climbing, which was relatively tangible, he could not get the hang of being in the flow of the river until he did. But look what it took for him to get there.
Wow. What a great story.
But I think that part of reaching for flow, which is an optimal experience, which is something ideally we all want to have in one avenue or another, does require some work. It's not going to magically happen. And that isn't dreadful or anything. It's just reality. Yeah,
that's right. And I've always loved that. I think of it as the chart that exists with flow, like the intersection of skill and challenge. And so, at work, for example, which is funny because Csikszentmihalyi, the dude who invented flow, let's just call it an invention.
Oh, wait, say his last name again. I can never say it.
I know. Chick sent me high.
Chick sent me high. Okay,
Chick
thank
sent
you.
me high. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
yeah. And unfortunately, he passed away sort of recently, which is too bad. That the interplay is that there is challenge, and there is, but it has to be just in that sweet spot where it's not overly challenging, where you feel like, well, great, I'm never going to get great at this. I suck. This is too much for me. Versus the challenge, like, no, that's a cakewalk. I'm so bored right now because I did that like a year ago. I want it. So the challenge being the essential ingredient is what is interesting. And, when a lot of people think about being happy and living the good life, we often underestimate that, well, actually, the feeling that comes for like well-being, one of the best well-being models in the planet from Martin Seligman, it's called PERMA. So P is positive emotions. So actually doing what you can to get into a positive affect. So positive emotions. E is engagement, and this is flow. So it's what is it going to take to make you feel really plugged in and engaged in the task, of which challenge is a huge component of that. I'm going to come back to challenge in a second. So R is relationships, presumably the good ones. Mm-hmm. M is meaning, so having some sense of purpose. It's not all just fun and games. And then the A in PERMA is achievement, and that is that, like, hey, that doesn't exist unless there's a challenge first, right? Like, wow, I mastered that thing. I reached my goal, and I feel proud of myself. And so challenge is baked into those two aspects of well-being just at the core. And again, the good life isn't about a walk in the park that's super easy where you get the cotton candy, although that does sound lovely. It does involve pursuit of something that might be just beyond us, but not too far beyond, because again, that's disengaging for most of us, but just enough to make us feel like, wow, I want to stretch. And wow, this is like actually making me grow. And and that's the stuff that enlivens so many of us, it's that when we meet and then exceed that challenge, that we feel great, which is why productivity can be so rewarding. And which is why Csikszentmihalyi, flow guy, was really clear that he often thought, like, because he did a lot of studies about leisure, which is related to flow, like what gets us into that state. And he was a rock climber, so he often felt like rock climbing is often a state that kind of makes you lose yourself in the rock. And he was often like, everybody loves leisure. We're always working for the weekend. And he goes, why is it that more people are actually in flow when they're at work, Monday to Friday, typical, versus the weekend, when he would say many people long to have these experiences, but yet what we do are these passive things that don't put us in flow. And so, we want to play an instrument, but instead we'll just listen to the music that someone else is doing. Or we want to play sports, but we'll sit on the couch and watch a football game. Someone else is playing it. Or we want to live a life of adventure, but we'll instead watch like a Liam Neeson movie and we'll let Liam have the adventure, right? So we're not really engaging that well. And I think, again, that's just because many of us are reluctant to get kind of off the sidelines and jump in. I get it. But it is funny to me that the thing that we often complain about, which is, oh, work, can't wait for it to be Friday. And I say those words all the time, but is that our chances of actually getting engaged are greater because work provides us with challenge that we're not signing up for outside of work. It's a long way of saying that.
What's interesting about this? It hits me that I always say if I'm bored, it's because I'm becoming boring.
Oh.
And now with what you said, it really hit me that when I experience boredom, that is a huge red flag that I need to just get moving.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So thank you for saying that. I'm going to find a quote right now about boredom that I've just fallen in love with. And well, I should be careful because boredom to me is like, it is the antithesis of a life well lived, because that does mean that vitality is shriveling, like dying on the vine. But I want to give it one little small shout out.
You're stuck in a habit. Yeah, you're stuck in a habit, and you need to expand your world. At least that's how I perceive it.
Yeah, I'm with you. The only little shout out I'm going to give to boredom, and then I'm going to move on because I do not want to give it any kudos, is that sometimes when we're go, getting bored is actually useful because it can then, after a little bit of time sitting in the boredom swamp, it can then spark the creative kind of a new idea. And so, okay, there's a slight upside to boredom for some people, but there's one little quote that I love, and it is that, okay, I'm already like overcome. Boredom is the luxury of those who have lost perspective of their impermanence.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
That's incredible.
Because said differently, if you knew you had a year to live, I don't think anybody would really be bored because we'd be getting on with it.
Well, some people get depressed and be bored, and that's where they're going to stay. There's a significant number of people that do that. But hopefully, a bump like that is going to shift your perspective and make you realize, I want to do the things I've always wanted to do. I want to be with the people I love, whatever is important to your value structure.
Right. I love that. It comes back to values. It does. But yeah, the boredom is a really helpful signal that we're either stuck in a habit trap, which does dull the edges of life, and I'm very, very leery of them. Back to the novelty thing about why, oh my goodness, novelty is such a portal. It's the answer. Csikszentmihalyi studied a ton of stuff about novelty, about that is the let's just call it like the spice shaker that you put on the meal that makes life interesting. And then it gets you into this state of what he calls with other researchers, vital engagement. So it's this really cool intersection between vitality, which occurs when there is newness, and there is sort of a, wow, all my senses are being activated, and wow, I'm walking down this market in Morocco and the smells are just intoxicating, and there are people that are different, and the sounds, I've never heard that music before. And now that is, of course, a very maximized example, but we could take that and apply that to even a micro scale, right? It could be that reading a different kind of book. You know, if you always read business books, what about a biography? You know, like opening up your eyes to something different that can create just a different perspective in life, enjoying life on just a little bit of off the path that you have well worn.
Where does present moment awareness intersect with vital engagement?
Ooh, I think that it's almost everything. That's such an interesting point. Because I will even say that if you're very aware of the present moment, it might even negate the need for novelty. Because novelty, there's a presumption. Now we adapt. So, you know, we're going to need something new to kind of keep providing something new and stimulating for us. But if you're really immersed in the moment, as we know, the moment can be boring as hell. But if you're really in that moment and observing that cloud and the water sitting in the water bottle, like that can be a life well lived. And there are stories of people who have been, let's just say, like wrongfully imprisoned, or, oh my goodness, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, you know, imprisoned in the Holocaust. Finding meaning and purpose and enjoyment in life, even in the most dire of circumstances, that's about being immersed in the presence and finding opportunity and appreciation for, in his case, like just lucky to be alive. And they would play these kind of fantasy games in the, I guess, where they were in the concentration camps, where they would take their one ration of bread, the piece of bread they had been allotted for the day, and they would pretend that it was the most luxurious meal they'd had, with fine plates and silverware and furnishings. And they would just live like immersing themselves in a moment, which I realize is not the true moment. It's more of a fantasy moment, but it just goes to show that we can create an experience for ourselves. And it doesn't mean we have to go to Morocco and walk the fair, right? Because a lot of people will say, I don't have enough money to live the life I want to live. And I would say, oh, golly, wow. Most, like 99% of the idea about living with vitality and meaning can be done in the most meager of circumstances, which I just think is so cool because it's accessible to all of us, right?
Oh, I totally agree. And I think once you've had an experience of a really peak moment, it lives on within you. And I think there's a learning, a knowledge in that you can recreate that, and perhaps in very different ways.
Ooh, that is so powerful. So there's this concept in positive psychology about savoring, and they say that it's across 3 temporal spheres. So over time, it can be savoring the past, the present, and the future. Okay, so the past is just delicious because anytime you pull up your phone and you look at the photos, you flip back like, oh, remember that hike? Or, oh, that was a fun. Like I'm sifting through 3,000 pictures of our cat. But when I get past those, and actually they make me happy too. But remembering the past, like you said, totally, Pat, like that moment, that really great time, so to savor in the past is an absolute strategy to enhance well-being. Savoring the moment you're in. And I find research fascinating that shows even if the moment you're in is kind of crap, if you're fully present in it, your perception of life satisfaction is actually better than if you're just either focusing on what's next and you're not really fully immersed in the now. And so that to me is exciting because, wow, if we're actually just plugged in to all 5 senses now, there's a lot to be savored. But then I get super excited about savoring the future, which is pre-savoring, which is about anticipation. And this one to me is like one of the lowest hanging fruit in the world of well-being because I encourage clients to look at their calendar and have one thing to look forward to within 1 week, one thing to look forward to within 1 month, and then one thing to look forward to within the next 3 to 6 months. And let's just be honest. This doesn't mean it's my big flight to Vienna and my big trip. No. It's stuff like I'm really excited. Friday night, I'm going to pick my husband up from the airport on a trip he's on, and we're just going to go watch this presentation about architecture here in Palm Springs. It's cheap, cheerful, easy, and then we're going to go grab a pizza. I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to that. And then the same thing. So are we always having something that gives us a little bit of a beacon of light on the horizon that just is fun to look forward to? And fun, I'm frothy with the word. It could also be meaningful, right? It could be that I'm really looking forward to going and spending time with the elderly or doing the thing that makes me feel like I'm full of meaning. But the anticipation is huge too.
Yeah, no, and I have several photography events coming up, and I'm taking a course about really trying to set the stage for what you want to accomplish with these pictures. What are you trying to say? What's the movement you want between the different photos? And you haven't even taken the photos yet. So, I find that so fascinating, and I have the equipment, it's mine. It doesn't cost me anything, but merely the ability to contemplate this, think about it, think about the different themes I could bring to a shoot is just so incredibly, it's endlessly satisfying. It's full of curiosity, a little adventure. What do you want to do with it?
Oh, I love that. So it sounds to me like photography, is it fair to say it puts you in a state of flow?
It's one of the things. Certainly, flying was my greatest, state of flow ever. That was amazing. I tell this story all the time. I'll share it with you all. To my listeners, I apologize. I was flying one day over Lake. I flew sailplanes. I had a 15-meter sailplane, and I'm flying over Tahoe one day, 17,000 feet or so. Beautiful, beautiful emerald green waters below, the mountains, the sun, and I turn the plane, and on the end of the wing is a little winglet like you see in a commercial jet, right? And I turn, and that winglet balances on a bubble of air. And I ride the entire 15 meters of wing and the plane, balance on that bubble of air and rise through the sky with the sun streaming through the cockpit. And it was an experience of eternal oneness is the only way I can put it. But it goes to so many of the things we've talked about. We've talked about flow, how you have to work to be in flow. You have to gain the mastery of whatever it is you're doing. All these elements that we've been talking about came together for me in that experience. Now, I'm not flying these days, but I did stumble into photography, and I find it fascinating because it's very creative. And now my skills are finally developing enough, back to flow and the need to develop skills, both mental and tangible skills using the camera, and experiential skills with what works, what doesn't, what different techniques can you use to put together a story out of, for example, I'm going to a riding competition. and it's a women's riding competition. And I'm thinking, what is a story I can tell? And one of the things I've been thinking about is maybe it's not the story of the riding the horses, which everybody does, get a great shot with a little blur, and, it's really cool. But maybe it's a story of all the details that go into it. What bracelet is she wearing? What are her boots? What is she doing before she gets on the horse? Is she pulling her hair back? What about the saddle? What about all these details that build towards the flow experience she's going to have?
Oh, just got shivers.
We'll see if I can pull it off.
I somehow think that you will. And oh, wow, this pre-savoring you're talking about is such a good example of planning ahead of how you might want this to come alive. And then, like, other times where in the moment it just actually something new and spontaneous occurs that just changes the direction.
Yeah. And, you have to be open to that too. You can't be rigidly set, and this is what I'm going to do. If it's not working, there's something else that will.
Beautiful.
So you have a book coming out.
Well, I'm writing it now. And so it's a work in progress, let me tell you. And it's one of the most, talk about flow. That to me is a flow experience. 12 chapters of all that we've been talking about. And I love it. So that will be probably either late next year, but I have an online course, which is exactly what this is based on, which is for now my baby until the other baby is born of the book. And it's how to live like you mean it. And it's 12 modules of getting in touch with widening life, deepening life, getting in touch with possible regrets and how to bust through them before they actually become regrets at the end. And then I get into aspects of well-being, like the facets of life around, we have our physical side of life, and there's the inner side, the dimension. There's the social side, of course, and then there's the productive side where flow would live in there too. So that has been, a labor of love as well.
And your website is?
It's 4000mondays.com.
Okay. I hope everybody will check that out. And just thank you so much for a really fantastic conversation today. You'll have to come back. We have a lot to discuss.
Oh, golly. Yeah, I love talking with you. You're just like, I've written down so many notes I'm going to go back to in these books you've mentioned. I'm excited. So I'm on fire. Thank you.
Want to hear more of the conversation? Sign up at bumpintheroad.us as a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. You can give it a go for free. Just use the code FREEMONTH. And thank you for listening today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.